pleasure to have this room so well filled for Dr. Samson Wasal's talk. Dr. Wasal has spent quite a bit of his life in two different worlds. One, the world of Kenya, and the other, the world of Ohio. The one may be a little bit more exotic than the other to our minds. But I think he's learned, I will leave you to decide which one. He has learned and managed to navigate both cultures fairly impressively and fluently as far as I can observe. So I'm very pleased to have him out here this evening to share with this group about some of the population and development issues that are facing Kenya. Now, how did I get connected with Dr. Wasal, who is doing population and development issues in Kenya, when my own research is focusing on plain sects such as the Amish in places like Ohio or Missouri? Because when he came to Ohio, he went to Ohio State University and had an advisor who talked him into studying the Amish for his dissertation, who happened to be my advisor 20 years later. And Dr. Wasal did leave him with more gray hairs, at least when I found him. And so he studied the Amish and took a lot of those ideas, theories, methods, and was able to transfer them back to places in Kenya and look at development issues as they relate to fertility. And he's got quite an impressive array of organizations he has worked for. He first had his bachelor's degree, having grown up in Kenya, in economics from Nairobi, the capital of Kenya. He then came to Ohio State University and got a master's degree in agricultural economics, went back to Kenya, and then Ohio pulled him right back again for a PhD in rural sociology. Agricultural economics and rural sociology are both programs housed in schools of agriculture, such as at places, land-grant universities, like University of Missouri or like Ohio State University. At that point, after he completed his dissertation on the Amish, he went back to Kenya and first served in the Population Council as a research fellow, where he was researching the relationship between fertility rates in Kenya, which in Africa they have very, very high fertility rates still in comparison to other regions in the world where many populations in East Asia, Europe, are not even replacing themselves with their fertility rates. So he was out there studying high fertility and his relationship with exchange among people, this relationship of reciprocity, this giving and taking among people, and how it influenced processes of high fertility. He caught the eye of the UN, the United Nations Development Program, and ended up managing two programs while he worked there. One, he worked at getting people in Kenya interested in participating, finding a way to participate at the government and community level in development programs. He also was involved in investigating the linkage between poverty and the environment and sustainability. Has anyone flown that little Cape Air airplane getting into Kirksville before? That little tiny Cape airplane. I asked him when he flew in, like, did you take the Cape airplane? Like, oh yes, that was a very big airplane compared to what he's been in Kenya, going to all these little remote locations with dusty airstrips that when you land just kick up dust so you can't even see anymore in these little 2-, 3-seater airplanes. Whew, I get nervous enough when I'm taking Cape Air in the Kirksville, let alone something like that. So he's had adventure in addition to studying population issues. After that, he went on to work at the African Institute for Development Policy, which I will let him explain more. Somehow he's managed to do all this work while being married and having 3 daughters. So maybe not low fertility, maybe not high fertility, but I guess Dr. Wasal has accomplished a medium area level fertility himself. You ever wonder what demographers think of their own fertility rates? Maybe that's a good question for the question and answer session. He returned to Columbus. Apparently there is something about Ohio that could win one's heart somehow. Huh?
Third time now.
Third time now, back to Ohio. And this time for a little bit of a different purpose. After working for 20 years in population development issues, there was something else that won his heart a little bit. When he had first come for his master's degree, there was an organization, the International Friendship, that helped him get established in this foreign country. Helped him with lodging, helped him get navigated around Columbus. Something of a outreach support effort for international students. Sort of appreciating what was done for him during that time, he has returned to this Christian ministry and now himself is helping international students who are coming and getting adjusted in the setting of Ohio State University. So a bit of a sacrifice, but something else. I guess the other side of a researcher, all of us researchers tend to have these private interests and passions and missions that don't always correlate directly with our research interests, but maybe brings out the humanity of your professors and doctors. So this is an introduction to Dr. Samson Wasau. Please help me in welcoming here to Truman State University.
Hello, can you hear?
Yeah.
Hi there. How's everybody? Are you all fine? Hi. Where I come from, you don't start talking with anybody before you greet them, because it's very impolite to meet somebody and just get into business. Yeah, you go to say hi. How are you? How are your goats and sheep and dogs? Yeah. So you create a rapport before you even start talking about anything specific. Yeah. So they haven't done this one. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So thank you very much, Corey, for that very elaborate introduction. Wow. Where did you get all that? Yeah, but I'm glad to be here and to share with you some thoughts about development in Africa. I'm going to talk generally about Africa because our experiences in Kenya can similarly be, related to other experiences in the continent of Africa. And so I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to see you all. My last station of duty was at the African Institute of Development Policy. This is a non-governmental organization that myself and a friend of mine from the country of Malawi created in 2009 with the idea to help our governments in Africa to value the use of research evidence in making decisions. One of the problems we have in Africa is that decisions are often made without using researched evidence. Yeah? So the purpose of this organization is to help governments and leaders in governments in Africa to really value research evidence and use that when they make their pronouncements or declarations. Yeah? When you say fertility is high, how do you know? Where did you get the information about fertility being high? So we want them to have this culture of using evidence in making decisions, especially for development. Yeah? So that's the purpose of this organization. So the work I'm going to present, we did it when I was working there as a director of programs. And so I decided I would make sure that I acknowledge that, because I'm no longer there as a director of programs, but I am an associate of the organization. Yeah? So I wanted to acknowledge that. And the focal areas that we have been doing research on are on population sustainable development, reproductive health, and health systems strengthening. Those are the broad areas. Okay? So that's about the African Institute for Development Policy. The acronym is AFIDEP, African Institute for Development Policy. Now, okay, we're going to be challenged here. Okay. That one? Okay. Either way, okay. Yeah, so That's the organization I worked with last before I left Kenya to come over here. I want to talk about the youth as a population component that is very important and critical for Africa's development. At least for now, we want to theorize that doing something about the youth in Africa should or could lead to socio-economic transformation, and particularly economic growth that we are all yearning for in the continent. Yeah? We are lagging behind everybody else in terms of our ability to produce, to generate wealth, and to improve the lives of our people. So the questions we have now is, what can we do to make sure Africa progresses? And we are saying that there is opportunity now with the changes that are happening that we should take advantage of. And one of the changes that are happening now is that Africa is really growing in terms of population numbers. Fertility is declining, though, but still fertility is quite high, okay? So the rate of decline is lower, but still have very high population. At the same time, most of the economies of Africa are growing quite rapidly. The average growth now is about 6%, and that's quite high, yeah? So there's opportunity now with this economic growth in Africa to help Africa move forward to a level where the material well-being of the majority of people, hopefully, could be improved, yeah? So, but the issue that I want to focus on is this one here. High young age that for now has created a problem of dependency. But looking to the future, we can see an opportunity for a window of opportunity that the number of young people that we have now in Africa could be turned into productive individuals who could move Africa forward towards economic growth and development. Yeah. Backwards. So just some economic indicators briefly. Africa is now the fastest growing continent in the world economically, okay? What that means, we still yet to see the future. But in terms of annual growth of the domestic product, Africa is really growing now. And so it has created a lot of opportunities for investment. And foreign direct investment, FDI, foreign direct investment has increased substantially from 37 billion US dollars to 54. And the Chinese, in the past 3 years, are a major investor in Africa. They are doing huge infrastructural developments all over with no conditions. They don't care whether you are democratic or whatever. They just come and do business. And most of our leaders like that, America comes and says, oh, you must be doing democracy, and so on and so forth. And a lot of our leaders don't care about democracy, yeah? So the Chinese are really taking up position in Africa now with huge investments, especially in the development of infrastructure, yeah? Remittances from persons living overseas have increased and helping to spur up the development in the continent. And now you'll find a lot of countries with long-term development strategies. Like Kenya, we have what we call the Vision 2030. Tanzania has Vision 2025. Uganda has Vision 2040. So the countries are looking forward and saying, okay, where do we want to move these countries in terms of development? So there's opportunity, there's awareness, and there is growth which should be harnessed for Africa to move forward, okay? However, we have a problem. We have a problem that though there is fast economic growth, there are certain structural issues in our economies that will need to be addressed for us to move forward in terms of development. Yeah? A lot of our development relies on agriculture, crop production, livestock production. Those in economic terms are not high demand products. Yeah? So, and then the sector is not very well developed in terms of technological inputs, is quite low level. So productivity is even lower. So you find occasionally people in Africa going hungry because there's not enough food produced. Yet there's plenty of land, plenty of sunshine, plenty of water, and yet there's a problem. So this sector particularly provides livelihoods that it needs a lot of push-up for it to really generate generate food and employment for the majority of the people. Urbanization is happening very rapidly. Our cities are growing very fast, and people are migrating from rural areas to cities, and we're having major urban problems because of this rapid growth of our cities. Yeah? And Nairobi now is almost over 4 million. Within a very short, the last 10, 15 years, it has moved from 2 to over 4 million. Yeah? A lot of it fed by rural to urban migration. That's created a lot of problems that needs to be addressed in terms of meeting the needs of people. Governance is a big problem in Africa. We are looking for good governance, whichever way you define that, but a governance that will help economic development to happen. Yeah? So there's problems with governance, including a lot of corruption in high places that lead to wastage of scarce economic resources. Quality of human capital, training, education, and so on needs a lot of work to help us move forward. Okay, but we are saying that despite our problems, and in spite of the opportunities that have been wasted in the past, we can now see a window of opportunity that comes from the rapid population growth that we can exploit looking into the future to enable development to happen. And demographers have come up with this topic, this demographic dividend, as an area of population dynamics that we can focus on and move it forward to enable development to happen. So we'll define that in a moment. But let's, before I define that, let me explain briefly. When we're talking about demographic dividends, it is within the broader context of a theory in demography that has been popularly used in development circles called the demographic transition theory. Yeah? And briefly, it is the process whereby populations or societies move from high birth rates and high death rates towards low death rates and low fertility. Yeah? So a lot of our countries have been here, and some are still here, where we have high birth rates and high death rates. So what happens to population is that it is stationary. Yeah, it's because there's so many people getting born and almost equal number dying, so the population is not growing. So we have been in this situation for some time, but in the past 30 or 40 years, with interventions, modern interventions, either from colonialism or from independence and improvements in certain important aspects of life like health, we have had stage 2, where death rates, the blue line, started to rapidly decline because of interventions in health, for example, vaccination of children. So indicators of life like infant mortality rates or child mortality rates have substantially declined in this stage, while birth rates remain kind of stationary. Yeah? So a lot of African countries are in this stage now where death rates have declined substantially faster than birth rates. Yeah? So what that means is that fertility remains high, you see this, and as we move to this stage, we can see there will be a window here where fertility begins to go down as death rates continue to go down. And beyond here, we'll have low fertility rates and low death rates, which is the situation in developed countries like the USA. Here, very low death rates, low fertility, and there are problems here at the opposite of what I'm going to talk about. Problems of aging or having more people who are in the older age categories, as opposed to our problem now, where we have more people in the younger age categories. So what do you do with the young people? So that's where now the idea of demographic dividends comes in. But before I go to that, just look at this. Population in 1950 in these East African countries as a sample was 25 million. These are all these countries together back then. Look at where it is now. Almost 140 million. And it's projected to go to over 700 million. Some people are saying by this time actually it will be over 1 billion. So the population is still growing very fast, and we expect it to continue growing fast because fertility decline is slow, but mortality declines is very rapid. And so people are having better survival rates than we've had before. So the population is going to continue to increase for a long period of time. And as it increases, we are having a very huge bulge of young people. And these young people are the ones that we talk about in this topic of fertility, young people in Africa. Yeah? People between 16 and 25, 30, there are different definitions of youth. I'll show you some diagram on that. But we want to take care of our young people. How do we do it? So we are saying that the opportunity in the future of increased fertility decline, increased death rate decline, will offer a window whereby there will be a lot more young people to take care of. And because there are many and they're young, they're energetic, they are creative, they are enthusiastic, if we harness their energies in the future by doing certain things that are important to enable them prepare to engage in the labor market, in employment and production of goods and services, then hopefully Africa can have transformation, economic transformation, socio-economic transformation that we are all yearning for. So we want these guys not just to have nice smiles, but also to have nice living conditions, opportunities for jobs, opportunities for self-development, opportunities to contribute to the growth of our economies in Africa. So the demographic dividend theory or idea comes into play because of the youth. Now, but who are the youth? One of the challenges we have as researchers is that different countries define the youth in different ways. Yeah? Look at this. Yeah? So if you are doing statistical analysis, you have to juggle around with numbers to make sure that what you are analyzing is the same category. Yeah? Generally, like Kenya, Tanzania, Ghana, and South Africa, they define the youth as, sorry, I was leaning on this. They define the youth as this age group. Nigeria and Swaziland, they define the youth as 12 to 30. Botswana, and Mauritius. MAR is Mauritius. They define the youth as 14 to 25-year age group. And then the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, UNECA, United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, they define the youth in this category. But what we do in our research is to use the United Nations agreed category, this one here. This is the internationally accepted definition of the youth, those between 15 and 24. And we have lots of them now, and in the future, there are going to be even more of them as we continue with high population growth and high fertility. So, talking about the youth, these are the people we are thinking about, but different governments will define them differently as shown here. Working age population. When we talk about the demographic dividend, we're talking about the economic benefit, the economic profit, if you want to use the word, the economic benefit that arises from employing or engaging the young people in the population in productive activities. And the way we measure that is that when you look at gross domestic product per capita after injection of the youth input into the system, then you can say, well, this difference has come because the youth has contributed this amount. There is theoretical and statistical methods, models, simulation models, and so on. I won't go into that, but I just want to say that this is the kind of research that we are now doing. Now, working age population, look at this general thing here. In 2010, this was the population of African population, the proportion of African population, total population to the world. This increased, it will increase to the 2100 to 38%. Now, the working age, out of this population, the young people, the working age whom we're defining, as I explained before, will really increase from these billions to these billions. That's a lot of people, yeah? And because they are young people, we are saying, let the governments of Africa stop and look at these numbers and say, how do we make our young people be major contributors to economic growth as we move forward, yeah? So these are broad numbers of working age populations in Africa relative to the world. So this is now how we define the economic dividend. Is a benefit arising from economic activities when there is a significant increase in the ratio of working age adults compared to dependents. Dependents could be the young people who are depending on those who are working, or they could be older people who are depending on those who are working. But as I mentioned before, older people is not an issue for us now. Our problem is in the bulge of the younger people, yeah? So the dependency that we're talking about will be of these working age adults, the proportion being smaller relative to those who are depending on them, yeah? But we are seeing in the future that if the many young people in Africa now can be helped to move towards being in the category of working age adults, if they're trained, they're prepared, and so on, then they are an asset, they're not a liability. So the demographic dividend idea is that, yeah, we can reap a benefit from investing in the youth, the young people, if we do it now, because they are coming into the scenery as a huge population block that needs to be targeted for development, yeah? But if we don't act now, then the young people will be will continue to be dependent on the few who are working, then we can't progress. Yeah? So the idea of demographic dividend is that yes, there is something we can reap from investing in the young people, and economically we can see the difference of this profit or this dividend when we invest in the young people. Let's look at the ratio of working age to dependent population. And we have used 3 regions: East Asia, South America, and Sub-Saharan Africa. Look at this trend. East Asia and Latin America, already by 2010, the working ratio, the ratio, the proportion of people who are working relative to people who depend on those who are working, already picked up and has started to go down. We are talking about an opportunity for Africa because for Africa, look at the red line. We are, from 2010 is when this ratio is still going up. So we still have more dependents, and they're young people. But we're saying as they get into that age of the youth as we define it, they need to be prepared to get into the economy, to get into employment, into productive labor force, so that they are no longer a burden to anybody. So if you look at the future beyond 2016, going forward, this ratio, the changes in it, should be turned into an asset by making sure that the young people are prepared to be productive, so that we change the ratio so that there will be more people working and fewer people depending on the people who are working. So this is what this generally shows. So how does it work? Essentially, when birth rates decline significantly, then the age structure changes. So we have more young people getting into adult working age category. So this age structure change is what is very critical in the analysis of the demographic dividends. And you'll see in the pyramids that show where the structure, the bases are. Yeah? So assuming that there is increased productivity, greater household savings, this can only happen if the working age adults are helped to enter the labor market as productive adults who can contribute to economic growth. Yeah? So they can accelerate economic growth if they're prepared to be involved, to be engaged in working in the labor force. But it's important to note that the demographic dividend is not automatic. It's not just going to happen. We have to plan for the young people. We have to invest. We have to move them towards being ready to enter the workforce. If that does not happen, then forget about the demographic dividend, because then you have missed the opportunity to prepare the young people to be in the workforce and to be productive individuals. So how does it work? When you have more working adults as opposed to dependents, then they have more. Think about somebody who has 5 children as opposed to one who has 2 children but same income. Yeah? Their expenditure patterns and their abilities to do certain things for their families are different, assuming same income and also same lifestyle. Yeah? So, but if there are fewer people who are depending on more people working, then the people working can get into saving, and they can get into having children whom they can take care of, because the cost of supporting many children, especially at a societal level, goes down when more people are working. Then you have less dependence. Yeah? Less dependence means resources are free to be invested in other places. But part of the problem of Africa today is that we have too many people depending on too few. So there's nothing to invest. So even at a family level, we find a family with many children struggling to survive. They can't save anything. Yeah? So the idea of the dividend is that, yes, we have this many children, but let us avoid what we are going through now in the future by preparing these many young people to have families that they can take care of so they can be released to work, save money, invest, and have better life. Yeah? So at a societal level, when we have more people working and fewer dependents, then you can have more savings. Because families, individuals save, households save. In aggregate, the society has got more savings that can be invested in productive things than just consumption, where there's high population. Okay? So that's the mechanism by which this demographic dividend idea works. That, yeah, let's have more people working, fewer people depending on them, then you can have more savings happening at the household level, at the societal level, then we can use these savings to invest and so on and so forth. To harness the demographic dividend, these three things needs to be done simultaneously. Fertility decline must continue, human capital development, investing in young people, developing their skills, their abilities to work, and their creativity, their innovativeness. This has to happen either through formal schooling or through specialized training, whatever it is, because that is what helps them to be prepared for the labor market. And then you're going to create jobs so that when they are ready to go to work, they have jobs. So employment opportunities are critical in this process. They have to be created as we prepare to get into the employment, the labor force. So I would ask, how do we know this? Where is this coming from? Researchers have looked at some countries in Southeast Asia, looked at their history of economic development, and have come up with very convincing evidence that these countries, when they were at a stage where Africa is now, they did some things, they took some actions that led them to industrialize and to improve broadly the living conditions of their people. A country like South Korea and Kenya in the early 1960s were the same level of underdevelopment or undevelopment. Yeah? They were the same level. But now, if you look at South Korea, you all know how productive they are. We are all using their stuff and so on. But countries like Kenya and other African countries, you don't see that kind of transformation. The industrialization and so on. So we're asking ourselves, what did they do right then that maybe we could learn from now and apply so that our future, we can also get into very rapid economic growth as they have done. So they're called the Asian tigers, countries like South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, Hong Kong, and these ones are also following suit, Thailand, Malaysia. They are developing very rapidly, generating a lot of stuff. And you people here in the USA, you know a lot of things are made in, you know what I mean? A lot of productivity in Southeast Asia has now attracted a lot of American production there. So now we are importing a lot of stuff from Southeast Asia because they have become so good at producing those things that we buy them. So we're saying in Africa, can we learn something from these guys? Because we started at the same level, but we are lagging behind. Okay? Need to go faster here. So if you look at countries like South Korea and so on, their development, 1/4 to 1/3 of the economic growth since 1970 came out of investing in young people, came out of this thing we are calling economic, demographic dividend. They invested in young people, they sent them to the USA, to the UK, to Europe, to learn, and then took them back home, created opportunities for them to work, and now, look at how they are productive. Yeah? So a lot of research has been done on these countries that have shown that they invested in the youth back there. And that investment has now resulted into economic growth that we are experiencing in countries like South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, and so on. Yeah? So their success was because they made sustainable investments in the young people in education, health, and so on. And that's what we are saying, that, well, maybe if we can apply this to Africa, we will experience development. Yeah? So I'll just summarize here a little bit some of the things they did in red. You can read those. But the supportive policy environment was very important. The governments worked hard to make sure that the economic environment